for inviting me to come at you from a Zoom meeting. I appreciate technology. I'm not very good at it. So I just want to start with a disclaimer that I'm sure I will screw something up at some point. So I appreciate both your flexibility, your patience, and also, any kind of positive tech vibes you can send my way. I really do appreciate. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's just start there. That's going to be very exciting. And hopefully this is going to work, and just kind of go through today's topic, which is leading and influencing with confidence. So I also know there's a chat feature and a comment feature. So if anything comes through, we're going to, address your questions or, answer any topics and discuss any topics that you'd like to hear about within this context. One of the things I was sharing with Becca when I built this that was important, I felt, was to, yes, talk about all the different things that combine with leading and influencing with confidence and what that looks like. I think there's a misnomer that maybe leaders or influencers are born. I happen to believe they're built. I think some people have maybe an extra secret part of their personality that makes them excellent leaders or excellent influencers. But I think that with practice and a couple tools, anyone can become a great leader. So it's important, I thought, because I believe that, to make sure that you guys hopefully walk away from this presentation with a couple of true action items that make sense for your work and the sphere of influence that you're hoping to grow. So that was sort of the mindset that I approached our time together with. So let's see here. That's me, already introduced myself, still me, wearing contacts that day. Very quickly, just a quick little bit about me, because I kind of believe that leading and influencing ultimately arises from who you are and how you communicate. So who I am the daughter and granddaughter of farmers from Kentucky and southern Indiana. That old time picture in the before times when people could go outside and, not wear a mask, is actually my grandmother. She was like second generation to go to college, and that's in front of a homestead down in Kentucky. The cow represents, we had cattle until I was halfway through high school. Not many, just enough for the family, but my roots are not, silver spoon, urban, city life, just definitely very country, definitely from, southern. But yet I yearned to go to a big city. So went to school in Tennessee to really kind of put the capstone on my education, and then spent time in Chicago and New York City, combined over probably around 15 years in both of those environments. But what I learned at both small boutique public relations firms and then at the time the largest global public relations and marketing firm, that's where I really honed my chops on what good communication is, and through those communication tools, really seeing how influencing and leadership has evolved. I had a couple of the biggest clients I worked on for many years, the 96 Olympics, which definitely dates me, I realized, down in Atlanta. McDonald's, Tide, in fact, a whole suite of products at Procter & Gamble, a lot of test market work. So you're sort of launched out there with a new product in a new place to try to, see what's going to happen. So that was really a great crucible for a lot of the skills I developed. And then volunteerism is a huge part of my story in terms of practicing the different action items we're going to talk about, and then seeing how those have resulted in some really unique and interesting opportunities. And then my family, that's a picture of my family right there. When my oldest son was graduating from high school, my family is the ultimate lab to practice great communication. And a lot of the things I'm sharing with you today, we use all the time, frequently in my family. My husband's in sales, and I've actually worked with my kids on as well. So hopefully you'll find some value there. I am going to just press pause, and I'd be really curious, if you guys want to chat into the chat, or, share what some of the interest areas are when you think about leading and influencing and communicating. What comes up for you? A lot of times, I think people look at those external activities or events, whether it's presentations, networking events, so on. But there's so much that happens internally. And, Becca and I were talking earlier, I think a really overlooked opportunity for all of us, because we all report into someone, is how to manage up. So I just would be really curious, just to press pause and hear from the group. Yes, Allie, managing up. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about that, but if there are a couple of sort of nuggets in here. Managing up is huge. If you can learn how to do it in one realm, you're going to be really successful in others. And leading among other leaders, I think that's an interesting point as well, because to some degree, leadership and influence, ultimately you earn them. I think we've all, just kind of show of hands, sort of virtually, where there's been a leader in your organization who really didn't command the respect or provide a positive growth mental attitude to the company. So people could have leader and title, but in fact they're not a leader. So I think that's really an interesting one too. Networking events, that is the ultimate sort of research lab. So I'm glad, I see, oh, you're seconding Tyler. Yes. Tyler, what did you say? Managing up. Yes, we're going to talk about all that. So thank you guys for participating and sharing. And I hope, I'm just personally so excited that I can see my slides and the chat, because I'm an old lady and this is all very exciting. So yay. Okay. When you think about your interest areas and start really broadening what that means, what are the first things that come up as potential barriers or pinch points? So interested to hear from the group what you think some of those challenges are in being successful to achieve what you'd like to achieve in your areas of interest. Lack of experience and comfort, I think those two go hand in hand. I don't know if the rest of the group agrees. I actually think a lack of a plan or tools, I do believe there is a way to approach these situations that's almost a formula that anyone else can know. So I feel like that can be helpful. I also think that people, maybe they don't feel natural, or it feels inauthentic to maybe have a plan or come at something in a different manner. So just definitely want people to feel sincere and know themselves, but what does that look like? Oh, whoops. And then sometimes results, like what are the results you're looking for? If you went to a networking event and maybe it didn't feel successful, how do you really evaluate that? Feeling inauthentic. Definitely. Yes. Addressing a bias from an internal or client because you're young. One of the examples I want to share, actually, I'll just tell you this now. The very first job I had that I started 1 week after graduating from college, when I started, I was 21 years old. The next youngest person in the company, and it was a small boutique firm in Chicago, was 45. And I learned a lot quickly, because I definitely felt like I was clearly the youngest, newest kid on the block. And how do you sort of get credible in that circumstance? And, also Allie mentioning, don't want to come across as having an agenda in networking events or managing up. We're going to talk about that, because an agenda is another word in the way I look at it for a plan. So you're strategic. An agenda, I think, sometimes gets a rap as being sort of devious or nefarious, or you're trying to pull one over on someone. In the way I look at it, an agenda is really maximizing our most precious resource, which is our time. No one wants to go to these events or be on the receiving end of something that feels like a waste of time. So we're going to talk about that, but I really am glad that you surfaced that, because we want to be authentic, we want to be comfortable, and how does that manifest in this environment? Here are a couple of really quick things that I think very quickly: communicating with confidence. And the reason I'm really focused on communicating is because if you can communicate who you are, what you're about, I think then you earn some of those leadership or those influencer kudos and opportunities. So communicating with confidence, it's your words, it's your energy, it's your action, it's verbal and nonverbal. I think that you can be really grounded and be who you are, but also always looking to evolve or adapt. My father's most favorite quote in the whole wide world was, "You never cross the same stream twice." And if you stop and think about it, you cross the stream, you turn around and you cross it again, it's completely different water. So I think we can be grounded in who we are, but how do we evolve? And part of it is putting others at ease. It's really hard to communicate if people are uncomfortable in a conversation. What it isn't, it's not about being an extrovert. It's not about you. Paradoxically, communicating with confidence is really trying to put other people at ease and learn about them and what their challenges are, whether it's a client, managing up, whatever it gets to be, and then knowing all the things and all the people. None of us have all the answers, and that's okay. I was a political science major. That is the only like science I've ever had in any kind of a title of anything. So this is completely unscientific, but I sort of took what I have learned. That includes not just the triumphs, but what I sort of cheekily am calling the tragedies, but also training from thousands of hours on the job. I had a really robust collegiate experience. I was at Tobias Fellows at IU Kelley School around leadership. So just kind of synthesizing all that I've seen in action and really working to figure out what would be actionable and what would I have liked to have heard as a young professional. So 3 cycles that we're going to go into. The first is pre-event anything, whether it's a meeting with your boss or a presentation or a one-on-one. To really effectively communicate, in my opinion, it starts with, and there's actually research to back this up, is knowing who you are. Like if you are confident in who you are and what you know, you create that space for effective communication. And that doesn't mean, you know, I'm a Libra and, you know, a world traveler. It's not that, it's not exactly that. It's more, what is the job you've come to do? Why are you in your role? How have you taken the role that you're in and made it yours? So I work for the Alzheimer's Association. We spend a lot of time being very clear about the job we've come to do, and that's to end the suffering for families and caregivers around Alzheimer's disease. So I am really confident when I talk about my work and the team's work because I know what I've come to do. Yes, I have KPIs, and yes, we have campaigns, and yes, we have reports, but what I've really come to do is help families and caregivers who are impacted by Alzheimer's and other dementia. And there's real strength in knowing yourself. The other thing about knowing yourself is, how do you communicate when you're comfortable? And how do you communicate when you're uncomfortable, when you're stressed, when there's a million deadlines? Because how you communicate when you're under pressure impacts the people around you. For example, my fallback when I'm stressed, this was a Hogan assessment. That's this real, intricate assessment that Kelley School does. But my Hogan assessment identified as one of my main go-tos when I'm stressed is bold. I get bold. I get real fired up. Animal House style. Remember when the Germans or the Japanese invaded Germany or whatever the funny phrase is? I get real bold. That works for some people on the team. Other people, it makes them be a little bit more quiet. Makes them a little uneasy. So it's not just knowing yourself and how you're impacting people when you're on and when you're comfortable, but then how you react when you're in an uncomfortable situation or you're anxious or you're nervous. My pro tip here is ask for feedback. And hate to say it, but you know what? Your family knows you best. Your family or your friends. Ask people how you communicate differently when you're stressed, because work can be very stressful, and a lot of the presentations and networking that we're talking about can provoke those stress reactors. So know yourself, the good and the bad. A is for agenda, and again, really appreciate the comments about, not wanting to quote unquote have an agenda. I would argue the opposite, that without an agenda, how can you communicate confidently if you don't know what you're asking for, looking for, or there to do? So I would I would ask you to consider that agenda is just, or maybe A is for accomplish. What do you want to accomplish? And be clear with yourself. It's not necessarily that you have to share that agenda or what you want to accomplish with others, but it's got to be, going to a networking event has to be more than my boss is making me go, or someone said I should try this networking event. Find a reason that resonates with you that links to what you've come to do, and then take steps to set yourself up for success before you even go to the event. So this is where I think managing up can be so incredibly important as a training ground. When you go to your boss for your one-on-one or your check-in, you know, have you prepared? What do you want to get out of that check-in with your boss? You know, yes, there are tasks you've been asked to do and you're providing a status report, but take a proactive approach about where do you want to be in a week, or you know, with your project, or where do you want to be in 6 months in terms of the work you're doing. So I think that can maybe not agenda, again, it could be accomplished, but if you're clear on what you've come to do and how where you are supports that, I think that comes across, again, that like that nonverbal energy, like, hey, I'm here, I'm ready to participate, I'm eager to get something accomplished. I think people recognize that, and they're more likely to maybe see you as a leader or an influencer because you're a gal or a guy with a plan, and that seems to resonate with people. An example of accomplish is, you know, for the Alzheimer's Association, we do a lot of calls with our constituents. We're reaching out to team captains, we're reaching out to donors. It's not just the task is the call, right? But the agenda or the accomplishment that we want to achieve is, we want to find out, are there any patterns? What are we hearing from this group of people? You know, we want to have those deeper relationships that we're building with others. So if it was just a matter of like, oh, make the phone call, check the box, we lose an opportunity to grow our own skills and our own knowledge about the people that we are working with to accomplish our broader goal. Also, at any point, if anyone has questions or, you know, something that is not making sense or a challenge, like, I'm here for it. I want this to be helpful for you guys. And the last part is listen, which may seem really obvious, but I think that active listening doesn't just mean being silent. I think there's a lot out there about like active listening. To me, active listening means, how do you engage in a conversation with someone that guides the conversation to either what's important to you, and what is important to you should hopefully be important to them, because that's how you lead and influence, right? You find a shared ground, or you find a shared interest. So, you know, I said earlier, it's not about you. It really isn't. But if you are leading a conversation, the goal should be to uncover something in the person across the desk from you, or across, you know, the bar from you at the networking event, or whatever it is, to learn more about them, to find out where those common mutual interests might be. A couple of phrases that I've seen my mentors use over the years that I have really tried to adopt. So this would be a tip: start listening for phrases like, tell me more about that. Oh, what was that like? How did X change things for you? People who are really skilled at active listening have a couple of stock phrases that they use to demonstrate that they're with the other person, and gets the other person to speak more or with greater detail as appropriate. So that would be a tip. One of the best examples of this, you know, back in the olden times, the '96 Olympics, we had a client who was really struggling and jeopardizing our timetable, our delivery, our outcomes, and just getting a ton of pushback. And with some of those active listening skills, we were able to uncover some stressors that this client had that had nothing to do with the job or the Olympics, but some personal stressors that was, you know, impinging on her time. So it allowed us as a team to retrench, look at the task list, and then divide and front load some work to take the burden off of her, but yet still meet our goals. And I think if we had just been so focused on checking the box, we would have ended up doing all the work or trying to maybe manage around her, which was not going to be an effective or smart political move at all. So, you know, that's an example of how I think active listening can help you with your clients. And then of course, really with anybody. And by the way, this all extends for those of you who have partners or kids or extended families that you're engaged with. I think that there's a lot to be done here in your professional set or personal setting as well. So The last thing I would say about this is when I typed this out, I was like, oh, that looks like a course I'm not sure I ever took. Pre-calc for any calculus or math whizzes out there. So the way I kind of remember this is pre-cal. Know yourself, what do you want to accomplish if you don't like the agenda word? And then what does active listening really mean? And how can you employ those techniques to really make sure that you've got those phrases and you've got that mindset when you go to whatever event it is that you're going. And that could include a presentation internally as well, or in front of clients. During the event, there are 3 things that I have found over the years that I've always gone back to. The first thing is the plan, and sometimes it's right before I walk into the room, or if it's in the car, I kind of visualize how I'm going to move through the event. If I don't know anyone, I go down to the granular, like, wow, I'm walking into this breakfast meeting at 7 a.m. down here on the Circle in Indy. I don't know who's going to be in that room. So my go-to there is I just make sure I find the host, I introduce myself, thank them for hosting, and usually have some kind of a follow-up question, that makes sense on the environment. So I don't walk in without an Anne Murray plan, because I don't want to stand there and blink like an owl and just those nerves come over. I've been doing this a long time and I still face some of those same barriers that maybe you have encountered. If I know everybody there, how many times have you guys had this? You walk into something, you're like, oh my gosh, it's all the same people. I see these people all the time. That's where having that agenda or what you want to accomplish comes into play. Maybe you're just there and you just want to say, hey, you know what? I think I can grow my influence and my leadership. I'm going to connect to people that maybe have never really talked. Maybe I can be sort of a matchmaker, not romantically, but professionally. Or, hey, you know what? That person just rolled off of a certain board. I'm interested in more volunteer work. I'm going to approach this person who is known to me, but I'm going to frame it up through my agenda or what I want to accomplish, which is, how was that volunteer experience for you? What have you learned from it? What would you recommend for someone looking to get involved? So I think there's always something new to learn about people that we know really well, including ourselves, if you want to get really deep. So I always walk in with a plan, and I generally have a sense of if I'm going to know someone or if I'm going to know no one. My best tip here is to spend just a few minutes thinking about what you want to accomplish in the meeting, thinking about what you're probably going to be walking into, and again, what your plan is, so you set yourself at ease, so you're not nervous, or you at least you have like a mental go-to if it feels kind of awkward. The other thing I would recommend, and I know this is really counterintuitive, is to turn off your phone and put it in your bag. I think being present, it allows you to maybe stand back, get the lay of the land, observe some patterns. Maybe there's someone that, oh, I keep meaning to talk to that person. Oh, this is a good time maybe to approach. So I would just really recommend that. One example, I was at an indie chamber event at the Motor Speedway a couple years ago. And I knew a couple people there, but it was a huge event because it was at the Speedway. They had a driver and a pit crew talking. But I put my phone away and I just remember standing. I went in, registered, and I stood back and I just observed the lay of the land. And I saw the people I know that I'll usually see, which is great. At some point, definitely make your way up to see your buds. But then I also saw a couple people that I really wanted to get involved with. I didn't know their names, but I knew the company they were with. And so I thought, I'm going to eat the frog. I'm sure you guys have heard that expression. I'm just going to go introduce myself and start a conversation. So plan doesn't mean that you spend hours on a battle plan. It could literally be you register, you hang back, you get the lay of the land, and then you go. The second aspect is what I call QCQ. Question, comment, question. This is something that we taught our boys even as like little kids. And I swear it's magic, and it's fascinating to see when it's in action, especially in maybe kids or teenagers, because people do not expect it. And it's kind of interesting to watch the reaction. This is my unscientific, foolproof formula for conversing with anyone. You ask an open-ended question. You comment on the answer. Again, active listening, you're hearing, your phone's away, you're not like checking Instagram or whatever it is. So your comment demonstrates that you've heard the answer, and then you follow up with a related question. But that follow-up question could be something that maybe shares a little bit about your experience, or shares something that could be a common interest or a common connection with the person across the table. If there is nothing else that you take besides managing up, QCQ, question, comment, question, practice it, because it can feel a little weird, but then you'll start seeing, oh my gosh, most of us probably do this naturally, but for someone who maybe, I'm not an extrovert or I don't have a lot of experience, this is a great way to get in the habit of participating and guiding a conversation, but making it all about the other person. So that one, I don't know, I use it everywhere I go. I see it with my kids. I just use this all the time. This has been like the one constant that I've done for really decades. Also, it's a great way, back to, feeling judged or whatever it is, because maybe you're a lot younger than a client or a boss. This is something that I was doing, not even realizing I was doing it at my first job, and I ended up staying at the Dylan Schneider Group for over 3 years. So I found a way to make it work. But it was a question because I needed to learn something, or I was genuinely curious about the strategy or whatever it was. And then I wanted to demonstrate that not only had I heard, but that maybe I had some ideas or an observation to share, which is part of that managing up. Like, you don't just want to be the receptacle or the taker of information. You also want to put it through your filter and then share something that hopefully is of value to the person you're speaking to, and then follow up with another question to keep moving the conversation forward. So I really highly recommend this. And notes, I should give a quick shout out to Lydia Robison, who is a member of Tippy Connect and on the team at the Alzheimer's Association. And it's through Lydia that I know you guys and know Becca, but she can attest to this. Take notes. I take notes with an old-fashioned pen and paper like a crazy person. But when I go to external events, I write on the brochure or the information flyer, and here's why. It helps me stay present. It helps me capture great phrases or great words or great frame-ups that might be useful down the line in another area for me. Like I said earlier, you can be grounded in who you are, and you should be, we all should be, but we should also look to adapt and evolve, because we never cross the same river twice. It also allows you to see patterns throughout speakers or throughout some of the information being presented. One of my tips here is, if you handwrite it out, I used to do this in college, remove the vowels from your words, and you can take a lot quicker notes. And it's kind of, I don't know, it just keeps me engaged. I have just enough ADD, I think, that I need to have my mind keep rolling. One example of how actually taking notes has been really beneficial, I've had people come up to me, hey, I noticed you were taking notes. Did you happen to get this? I've also used it as a conversation starter with speakers or attendees after a speaker has, after the event has concluded and we're networking. It's like, oh my gosh, did you happen to catch that? I thought that was so interesting. Or, oh, I circled this and question marked it. Do you work for this organization? What did he or she mean by this? So it's just another way to engender conversation, maybe with people you don't know. I will tell you, I use this most especially when I go to our Alzheimer's Association National Leadership Summits. We convene every year. There's thousands of us. So I use this even internally, like, hey, I saw you were from the Oregon chapter. I just heard someone present. They said this, this, and this. Can you tell me more about that? I'm so curious. I'd love to do it in Indiana. So it's a little bit of a guide post for us. So I'm a big fan. And then finally, in my completely unscientific little pie chart situation here, is post. Couple things. Evaluate. Go back to that A word, that agenda, or what you hope to accomplish. Because again, if time is our most precious resource, and you find yourself, you're at these events, or you're in these internal meetings, or you're working with your supervisor, and you just don't feel like you're getting anywhere, or it's not quite working for you, retrench. Did you accomplish what you needed to accomplish to be successful in where you are and where you want to be? What would you do differently next time? I mean, if you assume that none of us are perfect, which I am forced to assume that because I know that I'm not, I would always do something different. So sometimes capturing that quickly helps you identify patterns in your own professional development and in your own growth. One of my best tips here is to build your bench. If you do not have a bench, that's the first thing you should do as soon as we're done here. Start identifying those colleagues, those peers, those mentors, those people you vibe with that you can trust, and build your bench. Those are the people who'll tell you like it is because they love you and they want to see you be successful. I have a bench in my personal life. I have a bench in my professional life, and I literally don't know what I would do without them. And by the way, your bench could be 2 people. Build your bench because they will help you evaluate. They will help give you feedback. So really, really am a huge fan of that. One of the best examples is about 2 years ago, had a leadership lunch with some Chase Bank executives, and was with a colleague, and at the end said, how did he think that went? And I got feedback about what worked and what didn't. And the feedback about what didn't work was so valuable, and I didn't see it. I had a blind spot. So, I mean, that will make your work better if you're getting honest feedback from someone on your bench who wants you to be successful. A is for admire, another A word. Who have you seen or heard or witnessed be so successful? For me, Dr. Maria Carrillo at the Alzheimer's Association is mesmerizing. I hang onto her every word. She's our chief science officer, but she breaks it down in layman's terms, everyday language. She is phenomenal. When Maria speaks, I'm listening. I am shutting my mouth and I am listening. Who are those people in your world, internally, externally, where if they've got something to say, you're right there, pen in hand. You can learn from people like that. How do they carry themselves? How do they handle hard questions? How do they transition? That's a great place. That can be a great way to learn new things. Here's the other thing. Who is like that in your world that you observe where you would do anything not to be like them? You can learn so much from people who dominate the mic and repeat everyone else's points without adding something new to the conversation. Start looking for what I call the pace car. There is one at every event. There's one at every party. There's one at every wedding. There's one at every professional event. Who is the pace car? If you can't identify the pace car, you might be the pace car, and that's a different webinar topic. Happy to have that conversation. But look for the pace car, both positive and negative, and observe how others are reacting to that person. There is no better sort of on the ground people safari watching of how people react to those leaders and how people react to people who are trying to lead and not picking up on the clues and making it all about them. And finally, review. Do you remember those notes you wrote out? Review them. There may be some follow-up that you want to do. There may be something insightful, or maybe the name of a book or an article that you want to go back to. More importantly, evaluate for if you did not accomplish what you set out to do. Sometimes your notes are a guide, because either you need to reevaluate what you want to accomplish in these different events and activities, or consider indexing your time elsewhere. Here's my pro tip on the review, and I'm going to be really frank. I review my notes when I'm cleaning out my backpack or my bag the very next day. I find the crumbled up invitation or the brochure, which is typically what I write on, and then I scan it and I go through it. And if there's things that interest me, I highlight, and then I'll put them into my scheduled workflow, like books to read or articles to look up or prospects to contact. And then I throw it away. So it's sometimes I roll through it and there's absolutely nothing of value for me. So I'm done with this, fine. If you start noticing that you're participating in meetings or group projects and presentations or external events, and you look and evaluate and there's nothing that you're getting from it time and time again, notice the patterns and then find out what it's going to take to break that pattern. Do you need to approach it differently, or do you need to be spending your time elsewhere because where you're spending your time is not you're not deriving the benefit of what you have come to do and accomplish. So those are my sort of three segments of my completely unscientific communication cycle. And I only have a couple slides left. So I'm gonna roll through these. Again, any questions, please chat. For extra credit, couple of little things. Strength Finder activity, if you guys have not done, I think it's Strengths Finder with an extra S. You can go to Amazon. I think it's $20. You get a link. And then I'm sure many of you have done it, but it's a really interesting analysis of your strengths based on a quiz. And it can change over time. So I know people have tried it, maybe done it 2 or 3 times over their career. But what's most fascinating about it is you get a report out about what it means. If your number one strength is strategic, what does that mean when you're interacting with others? What does that mean when you're faced with something challenging or stressful? What does that mean when you work with people who have values that aren't strategic? And, you know, how do you communicate and lead within that context? So I highly recommend that. I actually ended up getting that for my husband and my kids when they were in their late teens, because I thought it was such a great insight into maybe what you're thinking and feeling and putting it to words. And what I really like about it is it focuses on your strengths, because the reality is we all have weaknesses. The best we can do is mitigate those weaknesses and really focus on our strengths, which is kind of the philosophy of StrengthsFinder. My husband is in consultative sales and has been very successful using a formula. And I know we talked a little bit about what I would consider formulas in this presentation, especially that QCQ, question, comment, question. But I think there's plenty of free resources and some great tips and tools that might make sense based on your industry or what you're hoping to accomplish. So I would recommend looking at that. Build your bench, build your bench. We're always communicating verbally and non-verbally to people who we might not see, but they see us. Build your bench so you try to get that holistic 360 review of yourself, and be grateful for the feedback. If someone loves you enough to share something with you, receive it with an open heart. And finally, find your pace car. I mean, this is a drinking game if ever there were one, but find your pace car. There are good ones and they're not so good ones, and you can learn a ton from both of them. And I guess in conclusion, my personal belief is that if you want to communicate with confidence, which then earns you the ability to lead and influence others, because that is such a tremendous privilege. It's impossible to lead, influence, and communicate with confidence if you don't know who you are, what you've come to do, or what you're about, what's important to you, what your values are. Take time to know where you are and where you want to be, and be mindful of those changes, because we all evolve and adapt. We'll all be students of ourselves our entire lives. Make a plan, back to that accomplishment or agenda, make a plan. If you're going to spend your most precious resource, which is time, anywhere, make sure that you're leveraging that time to the best of your ability, not just to make it all about you, because that's not what this is about, but if you really want to connect with others, make a plan so you're doing that. And so you can evaluate, again, what works, what doesn't. Make a plan. Read. I am pretty convinced that most of my success came from the summers I spent on my grandparents' nearly 1,000-acre dairy farm in Kentucky. It was me, my 2 grandparents, and a couple folks that helped, that came in at 3 a.m. and 3 p.m. to milk cows. Anyone in the dairy industry knows you're on a 12-hour schedule, 24/7, 365. I read all the books all the time. Right now, I'm not going to lie, my primary mode of reading right now is BuzzFeed articles. I'm not proud, but I always try to keep a book, and here's why. I'm visual, and some of you are probably visual as well. Reading a book you can see how sentences are constructed. You can see the language they use. You can see the breadth and the depth of the words, and how words can evoke feelings and set scenes. Speaking with confidence means, in my opinion, being comfortable and excited about words and about what you want to say and how you want to say it. So I just think reading is so important, and it's, we're also technology driven these days that it can feel a little bit of a lost art. Get your Kindle sparked up, just read. I have tons of book suggestions for anything from serious to absurd. So happy to that's a separate webinar in itself. Practice with your family, practice with your friends, practice internally. Managing up means you're not just checking off the task on the list, you're doing the task, you're discerning patterns, you're identifying pinch points, and then you're bringing that to your boss's attention before it's a problem. And it's not that you're just bringing it to their attention, you're bringing it to their attention, you've got the data and the information that shows why you're concerned or why you think X is happening, and then you have a solution or a proposed solution. But that, to me, that's the key of managing up. If you practice managing up on the daily, so many of these items that we talked about, you will be using to do just that. So again, it's doing the work you've come to do, being really thoughtful and present with the work and discerning patterns, identifying pinch points, and then bringing it to your supervisors or your client's attention with proposed solutions already baked in. You don't have to have all the answers, but if you're going to open the door to the conversation, have the confidence to share what you're finding, share your interpretation of what you think it means, and then offer some ideas for consideration to get that collaborative brainstorming going. If you can do that, that is the epitome of managing up. I do it every single day in my job. Everyone who works for anybody does. And if you've got a client base, you're managing to your clients all the time. So happy to talk more about that at any point. Finally, my last thing I would say is that volunteerism is a real world lab that I highly recommend. If you're not taking advantage of volunteer opportunities, do it now. My very first job in Chicago, I got through a volunteer opportunity at my college. The second job I got was because I volunteered on the Lincoln Park Zoo board. The first job I had actually at the Alzheimer's Association, I got from volunteering in an executive capacity at my kids' school. I've had 3 jobs in my life. I got all 3 of them through volunteering, because you can put these practices into the real world and you never know who you're going to meet. You never know who's going to be sitting across from that board table or that gala planning committee or whatever it is. So use volunteerism as a real world lab to practice some of this stuff. And then I'm going to leave you with this last slide. Start before you're ready. This may seem counterintuitive when we talked about what do you want to accomplish and know yourself and create a plan. Pick a couple things that you think feel really actionable and speak to you, and just start. There's no wrong way to start. There's no wrong time to start. Start before you're ready, because as you can anticipate, sometimes we feel like we're never ready, and that's okay. I know I've said all the words. Lydia knows I like words. I like to say all the words, so I'm really sorry, because that also is sort of counterintuitive, but I am going to point out technically this was a presentation, and so hopefully I did not overstay my welcome or miss the point of the brief. But I guess in conclusion, are there any questions? Is there any feedback? Becca, kind of turn it over to you to take it from here if there is anything that you'd like me to answer or expand on.
Thank you, Anne, for going through everything. You were not too wordy, and if Lydia says otherwise, we'll talk offline. Just kidding. But if there are any questions, you guys can go ahead and post them in the chat now. Anything that we didn't discuss that you would like more information on, more empowerment on, more uplifting. Awesome. Lydia says not too wordy, so perfect.
Thank you, Lydia.
All right. Well, if anyone does end up having any questions, feel free to reach out to me. along to Anne, and you guys can definitely talk one-on-one. Amy says, this was fantastic. Thanks, Anne. Thank you guys all. So Anne, thank you sincerely. This is really, truly empowering. I appreciate all the advice and leading confidently. Our next webinars now are scheduled to be what to do if you are the pace car. and
Okay.
And Anne's reading list. So.
Okay. I have to interject. I would love to know, so just chat it in the chat, please. I would love people's reaction on the pace car. I mean, you can't unsee it. Like, now that you know that there's a pace car, and by the way, I have to give my best friend in the whole world, Sarah, wherever you are, I hope you hear me. You know, she named it the pace car 25 years ago, and she has, dang it, she's not been wrong. And they're personal and professional.
I definitely agree.
So
I have both been the pace car and crossed paths with the pace car multiple times. More the pace car on myself than I'd like to admit. So,
Amy, I got you. Yes. Here's the thing. If you've been the pace car, you know the deep, hot, burning shame of being the pace car, which is the best antidote to ever being the pace car again. So my husband and I, when we're out, it's like, okay, who do we think is going to be the pace car tonight? So-and-so. Okay. Just draft behind so-and-so. Okay. Go team. Like, you know, it's a strategy. It's a tactic. It's a meme. It's a t-shirt. Like, yeah.
Definitely. Well, I hope that none of our audience is the pace car in the near future. Learn from it and grow. In all sincerity, I've also been in that leadership role for a majority of my life, and really, I've had incredibly awkward interactions at times. So more often than not, if you know me personally or professionally, it doesn't matter, awkward all the time. So I really do completely agree that knowing yourself is really step one on that journey to success and confidence. So I appreciate you going through those steps. Thanks again for speaking to our audience on this really highly sought after topic. I do have a poll for all of our audiences before you guys leave. This is the poll for TCYP Connect. If you could go ahead and answer those. Just a few reminders while you're doing that. This Thursday launches our job search series with career coach Crystal Corey, or C to the fourth power. This 4-part series delves into how to advance your career through upgrading your resume, cover letter, interviewing skills, and networking skills. So join us every Thursday in June for that. Last reminder, TCYP Connect's Top 10 Under 40 nomination form and application form are now open. So if you know a young professional living or working in the Greater Lafayette area deserving of this award, don't hesitate to nominate them. If you are a deserving young professional in the Greater Lafayette area, nominate yourself. This is 2020. We support self-growth. So links for these forms and registration for our next webinar series is in our follow-up email from today. Thanks to everyone for joining us. If you'd like to rewatch this webinar, visit us on our website, tcpconnect.com. Here in just a few hours, we'll have it up. Just click events on there. So everyone continue to stay safe, go lead confidently, and have a fantastic Tuesday. Bye, guys.